London Airport, January 22, 1952, a crisp winter morning. A crowd has gathered not just reporters, but aviation officials from around the world. They're watching something that has never happened before in human history. On the runway sits the de Havilland Comet 1, registration GALOP. It has no propellers. Its 4 ghost turbojet engines are neatly buried in the wing roots. To everyone watching, it looks less like an airplane and more like a silver dart from the future. The plane accelerates with astonishing quickness. It's already airborne in half the runway distance used by propeller planes. As it climbs, someone in the crowd remarks, "It's like watching a ghost." The noise isn't the problem. This was the world's first scheduled commercial jet flight, carrying 36 passengers and 1,200 pounds of mail to Johannesburg. Britain had won the race to the jet age by 2 full years. They were about to learn that in aviation, being first is sometimes the most dangerous place to be. In our previous chapter, we witnessed how the Second World War unleashed 6 years of unprecedented aviation innovation: jets, radar, pressurized cabins, all born from necessity. Today, we follow that technology out of the combat environment and into civilian life. This is the story of the birth of the jet age, but it's not the simple triumph narrative you might expect. It's a story in 3 acts: British brilliance, severe incident, and American redemption. Most importantly, it's the story of how one aircraft failure made every commercial flight ever taken exponentially safer. Welcome to Chapter 4. The Jet Age Begins. The post-war dream, 1945 to 1949, when hostilities ended in 1945, the world faced a peculiar aviation paradox. There were more advanced aircraft than ever before, but virtually no commercial service. The immediate solution was conversion. The legendary Douglas DC-3, which had dropped paratroopers over Normandy just months earlier, was stripped of defense hardware and fitted with 28 passenger seats. The mighty Boeing B-29 Superfortress, designed to carry heavy payloads, became the luxurious Boeing 377 Stratocruiser, complete with a lower-deck cocktail lounge and sleeping berths for 100 passengers. But these were stopgap solutions: propeller planes with pre-war thinking applied to post-war expectations. The real revolution was already flying, just not for paying customers. The German Messerschmitt Me 262 had proven jet propulsion in operational service, reaching 540 miles per hour, while Allied fighters struggled to reach 400. The British Gloucester Meteor had given the Allies their own jet fighter. The question wasn't whether jets would enter commercial service, but rather who would get there first, and whether the traveling public would accept them. Britain made a strategic, almost desperate decision. The global conflict had left the country economically devastated but technologically advanced. Aviation leadership represented more than just business. It was a matter of national prestige, a way to prove Britain remained a world power. The government's Havilland Committee identified 5 types of post-war aircraft needed. Type 4 was the most ambitious: a jet-powered mail and passenger plane capable of crossing the Atlantic. The contract went to de Havilland, a company with a reputation for elegant, innovative designs. They'd built the Mosquito, the wooden wonder, during the global conflict. Now they faced a different challenge: create not just a jet aircraft, but one that could carry passengers in pressurized comfort at altitudes never before attempted in commercial service. The project was codenamed the DH-106. The world would come to know it as the Comet. The de Havilland Comet that emerged from the drawing boards was nothing short of revolutionary. Chief designer Ronald Bishop made several bold decisions that would define and nearly doom the aircraft. First, he placed the 4 de Havilland Ghost turbojet engines within the wing roots, creating a clean aerodynamic shape that reduced drag. Second, he designed for a cruising altitude of 40,000 feet, 10,000 feet higher than any contemporary propeller airliner. This required a fully pressurized cabin, something only long-range aircraft had attempted. But Bishop's most visually striking innovation was the cabin windows. Previous airliners had small, round portholes. The Comet featured large, square windows measuring 17 by 10 inches, nearly 5 times the viewing area. Passengers would feel like they were in a moving observatory, not a cramped tube. The cabin itself was designed with meticulous attention to passenger comfort. Seats arranged in 4-breast configuration with generous legroom, elegant Art Deco-inspired interiors, and noise levels so low people could speak in normal voices. On July 27, 1949, test pilot John Cunningham took the first prototype aloft from Hatfield Aerodrome. His report was ecstatic. It flies like a fighter responsive, smooth and incredibly quiet. The aircraft exceeded all performance expectations, cruising at 490 miles per hour, while propeller airliners struggled to reach 300. Commercial service began on May 2, 1952, with BOAC's route from London to Johannesburg, via Rome, Beirut, Khartoum, Entebbe, and Livingston. The trip took 23 hours and 20 minutes, with stops half the previous fastest time. Passengers were astonished, one wrote in the London Times. One drinks champagne and watches the African continent unfold below, entirely unaware that one is traveling at nearly the speed of sound. It is the most civilized form of travel ever devised. Orders poured in: Air France, Canadian Pacific, Japan Airlines, even the Brazilian Air Force for VIP transport. By early 1953, de Havilland had 50 orders, with options for 30 more. The future seemed unlimited. Then, on a stormy afternoon in Calcutta, everything changed. The Skyfalls 1953 to 1954, May 2, 1953, exactly 1 year after commercial service began. A Comet 1, registration GALYV, operating as BOAC Flight 783057, took off from Calcutta's Dum Dum Airport, bound for Delhi. The aircraft encountered a severe thunderstorm shortly after takeoff. Witnesses on the ground reported seeing the comet enter a particularly dark cloud, then emerge in pieces. All 43 people on board lost their lives in what became the first catastrophic jet airliner accident. The investigation, led by Indian authorities with British assistance, concluded the cause was overstressing of the airframe during an attempted escape from a severe thunderstorm. In simpler terms, pilot error combined with extreme weather, the Comet's design was exonerated. The fleet returned to service with minor modifications to weather radar and pilot training. 10 months passed. Then, on January 10, 1954, Comet Gialipta, very first production Comet, the same aircraft that inaugurated jet service, took off from Rome's Ciampino Airport as BOAC Flight 781, bound for London. The weather was perfect, clear skies, light winds, at 10:51 a.m. Captain Alan Gibson radioed that he was climbing through 26,000 feet. It was the last transmission ever received. Minutes later, fishermen near the island of Elba saw debris falling from a clear blue sky. There had been no explosion, no fire, no distress call. The aircraft had simply disintegrated, and 35 people lost their lives. The entire Comet fleet was grounded, pending investigation. After extensive modifications strengthened wings, new engine cowlings improved avionics, the Comet returned to service on March 23, 1954. The grounding had lasted just 11 weeks. Then, on April 8, 1954, only 16 days after returning to the Skyzone, another Comet, gaily operating as South African Airways Flight 201, vanished near Naples, under nearly identical circumstances: clear weather, high altitude, no distress signal. This time, there could be no excuses. Every Comet in the world was permanently grounded. Britain's aviation triumph had become its most expensive, most public failure. The implications were catastrophic. De Havilland faced financial ruin. Britain's reputation as an aviation leader was shattered. More importantly, a fundamental question now haunted the entire industry. If the most advanced airliner in the world could inexplicably fall from the sky, was jet travel inherently unsafe? The investigation that followed would become the most extensive, expensive, and technically sophisticated in aviation history. Sir Arnold Hall, director of the Royal Aircraft Establishment, assembled what he called the largest detective force ever assigned to a machine. Their task was unprecedented: determine why a brand new, technologically advanced airliner had disintegrated in perfect weather twice. With no black box flight recorders, they wouldn't become standard for another decade. Investigators faced a mystery with no witnesses and no surviving evidence, or so it seemed. Then came a breakthrough. Italian fishermen had recovered about 70% of the wreckage from Flight 781, scattered across 120 square miles of Mediterranean seafloor. Using newly developed sonar and deep-sea recovery techniques, the Royal Navy spent months retrieving fragments, some from depths of 350 feet. In a specially constructed hangar at the Royal Aircraft Establishment in Farnborough, Engineers began what they called the world's largest jigsaw puzzle. As they painstakingly reconstructed the aircraft, a pattern emerged. All major fractures originated from the corners of the square windows. But why? Hall's team developed a revolutionary hypothesis. Perhaps the repeated pressurization cycles were causing microscopic cracks that grew with each flight. They needed to test this, but how? Their solution was as ingenious as it was simple. They would place an entire Comet fuselage registration, GLYUN, a giant water tank, and simulate years of flight in weeks. The test rig was engineering theater at its most dramatic. The fuselage was submerged in 250,000 gallons of water. Hydraulic jacks, simulated air pressure differentials. Each flight consisted of pressurizing to 8.25 pounds per square inch, holding for a minute, then depressurizing. One complete cycle represented one takeoff and landing. The first 1,000 cycles passed without incident. The discovery was groundbreaking. The square windows, while beautiful and revolutionary, acted as stress concentrators. Each time the cabin pressurized and depressurized, tremendous force focused on those sharp corners. After about 3,000 cycles, microscopic cracks had grown into catastrophic failures. The Comet's designers, pioneers in pressurization, had fundamentally misunderstood how metals behave under repeated stress. They designed for strength, but not for endurance. America's answer, 1954 to 1958, while Britain grappled with the Comet failure. 5,000 miles away in Seattle, Boeing engineers watched with intense interest. They too were developing a jet airliner, but their approach was characteristically cautious. Boeing had entered the jet age through the defense door there, KC-135 Stratotanker, an aerial refueling aircraft for the U.S. Air Force, was essentially a jet aircraft. Converting it to civilian use made economic sense. But the Comet failures presented both a crisis and an opportunity. Boeing's chief engineer, Maynard Pennell, made a critical design decision. All windows on the new 707 would be small, oval, and most importantly, rounded at every corner. The lesson from Farnborough was clear. Curves distribute stress, corners concentrate it. Boeing also benefited from another advantage: scale. While de Havilland was essentially a boutique manufacturer building Comets almost by hand, Boeing had mastered mass production during the Second World War. Their factory in Renton, Washington, could produce aircraft at a rate and cost the British couldn't match. Still, airlines were skeptical. Was the public ready to trust jets again? Would they be economical? The answer came from an unlikely source: Juan Trippe, the visionary chairman of Pan American World Airways. Trippe had revolutionized aviation twice, before first with flying boats across the Pacific, then with the first scheduled 707 service. Now he saw jets as the next frontier. On October 13, 1955, in what the New York Times called the billion-dollar gamble, Trippe ordered 20 Boeing 707s and 25 Douglas DC-8. A combined order worth $269 million, equivalent to over $2.6 billion today. The message to the industry was clear: the future is jets, and Pan Am is leading. Other airlines followed. American, TWA United, Air France. The 707 entered service on October 26, 1958, with Pan Am's Flight 114 from New York Idlewild, now JFK, to Paris La Bourget. The crossing took just 6 hours and 15 minutes, half the time of the fastest propeller service. Jet travel, stalled by setback, was now unstoppable. The jet age transforms the world. The Boeing 77 didn't just flew, it transformed. Its economics were revolutionary. While a 707 cost $5.5 million compared to $3 million for a Douglas DC-7 propeller plane, it could make 2 transatlantic crossings in the time the DC-7 made one. More flights meant more revenue. Jet engines, while thirstier per hour, were more efficient per mile. Suddenly, long-distance travel became profitable at lower fares. Airlines responded with aggressive marketing. Jet Clipper services promised breakfast in London, dinner in New York on the same day. The jet set became a cultural phenomenon. Celebrities, businessmen, and diplomats circled the globe with unprecedented speed. Frank Sinatra's "Come Fly With Me" album captured the glamour. Ian Fleming's James Bond became the archetypal jet-age hero. The very rhythm of international business changed. Executives could have meetings on multiple continents in a single week. Airports underwent their own revolution. Runways were lengthened to 10,000 feet to accommodate jets. The jet bridge was invented, replacing movable stairs. Terminals became architectural statement Ciro Surinen's TWA Flight Center at JFK, with its sweeping concrete curves, looked like it had grown organically from the jet age itself. The world's geography was fundamentally rewritten. Previously remote destinations became accessible. Tokyo was now 18 hours from New York instead of 36. Australia was no longer a weeks-long journey. The hub-and-spoke system emerged naturally, with major cities becoming global transit points. The Boeing 777 didn't just transport people, it created the framework for globalization itself. Legacy of the pioneers. What became of the Comet? De Havilland completely redesigned it. The Comet 4, introduced in 1958, featured oval windows, thicker skin, and completely redesigned structural elements. It was, by all accounts, an excellent aircraft. It even briefly reclaimed the first mantle by launching transatlantic jet service on October 4, 1958, 22 days before the 707. But the market had irrevocably shifted. The 707 carried nearly twice as many passengers, 181 versus 101, with similar operating costs. Boeing's production capacity dwarfed de Havilland's. The Comet 4 sold only 74 units. The 707 sold 1,010. The British jet age had begun with a triumph, stumbled into setback, and ended in commercial disappointment. Yet, to view the Comet as a failure is to misunderstand its legacy. Every airliner you've ever flown in has oval or rounded windows because of the Comet. The rigorous fatigue testing protocols developed at Farnborough became international standards. The understanding of metal fatigue transformed aircraft design philosophy. Planes were now engineered for thousands of cycles. Not just structural strength, the Comet's most important contribution was cultural. It proved that passengers would embrace jet travel. It demonstrated that crossing oceans in hours instead of days wasn't just possible, but desirable. It created the market that the 707 would later dominate. In aviation, progress is often written in setback and response. The Wright brothers' crashes led to better controls. The Comet's severe incidents led to safer structures. Each failure makes the next success possible. The British didn't fail to create the jet age, they succeeded in revealing its true cost so that others could build more safely upon their sacrifice. And so the foundation was laid. The jet age had survived its difficult birth. Next, aviation would face its next great question. If jets made travel fast, what would make it massive? The era of the jumbo jet was waiting in the wings. If you want to be part of this journey through aviation history, subscribe to Aero History. The story of flight continues with you.